I recently got the chance to stay at the Inn at 500, located in the heart of downtown Boise. With complimentary drinks at check-in and spacious luxe penthouses and suites, it's an ideal spot for celebrations and your visitors. It was the perfect place for me and my husband to sneak away for a little staycation. We loved the cozy fireplace in our room and the balcony with gorgeous views of the city skyline, where we shared coffee in the morning. Ready to plan an unforgettable Boise stay? Book now at innat500.com. Today on CityCast Boise, our local music scene is buzzing, even in the dead of winter, as Under the Trees is kicking off the city's first ever Winter Electronic Music Festival this weekend. We're diving into how this genre is carving out a space in Boise, the challenges of planning a festival in the cold, and why it's worth hitting play on something new. It's Thursday, January 23rd. I'm Lindsay Van Allen, and this is what Boise's talking about. Joining me today is music professor and local DJ, Dr. Tom. Thanks for being here today, Dr. Tom.
Oh, I appreciate you having me. Thank you very much.
So I'm really curious, and maybe this speaks to some of my misconceptions, but how has your background as a PhD professor influenced your work as a DJ and in building the local electronic music scene in Boise?
Yeah, great question. So, it's rather unusual actually to be a professor and DJ. So I was going to say that. And so I teach music theory at the College of Idaho. And during my studies, I became obsessed with music theory and kind of classical music. But concurrently during that whole time, I had this sort of intrinsic interest in electronics. I don't listen to lyrics. I have no idea what people are saying in songs. For whatever reason, I tend to gravitate towards the musical structure. And so electronic music has been a really fun area to work in because it allows me to kind of work with the electronic trinkets and knobs and buttons, but also still go deep into the musical structure. So that kind of is how I got into electronic music. And I think we tend to silo, classical music is this, EDM is this. And actually, I think both of them could benefit from some overlap. While I was in Montreal, that's where I did my PhD at the McGill University, I got involved in the electronic scene there because they have a very vibrant electronic music scene. And I saw kind of people united around music, dancing, and it seemed like the perfect thing for me to get into this space where I could, because I love being around people and making people happy or teaching people, being in front of people, so I like performing. And then having everybody dance in a euphoric way was just kind of like, this is the dream. So when I got to Boise, I started to miss that atmosphere that I had in Montreal with these festivals, and I wanted that ultimately. And so I decided to start Under the Trees, and Under the Trees blew up. It's only been running for 8 months now, but it's become a big part of my life, along with teaching as a professor and now DJing and producing.
And so I'm really curious, based on what you've seen, this large and sudden growth of Under the Trees, would you say Boise's an electronic music city?
I think every city is an electronic music city, but Boise, from my outsider's perspective, compared to Montreal, it wasn't as mature in that regard. And by mature, I just mean it didn't have all of the kind of components that make a super vibrant and kind of place where electronic music is kind of at the forefront. It's sort of the cultural piece. And here it was sort of, every time we threw an event, it was like people brought their rave clothes, which was new to me because in Montreal, there's so much electronic dance music that's just what it is. Like you just go out and you don't necessarily dress up in rave gear because that you would have to wear that every night. But I've had so many people come up to me and say, this is my first rave, or this is my first time going to an electronic music show and I love it and I'm going to be at every single one. So yeah, I think it's catching on.
So what are those components that maybe you saw in Montreal that Boise doesn't have yet? And are you hoping to bring those here or help develop those?
Yeah, absolutely. So, I think that at the largest scale, it had a regular reoccurring festival series. And so that's something that I wanted to bring with Under the Trees. And so having kind of this reoccurring event that we can go to. And right now it's much it's at a smaller scale. In Montreal, they have it every Sunday, and every Sunday about 10,000 people go to this like location and have this event. And so we'll have to cut back on the frequency, so maybe once a month or maybe twice a month. The other side is kind of education around what a DJ is. There's many different types of DJs. So you have a DJ, like a wedding DJ, let's say. And then the DJing that I'm interested in is kind of DJing as an artist, or music production and DJing. So, basically people who make their own music and then play that music out for an audience. So I think there's an educational component around the DJing side of things, talking about all the different subgenres and how those mix and making a successful night at a nightclub, for example. It's really taking off. Space Banana is sort of the headquarters for electronic music in Boise. And they're starting DJ residence, which is what Montreal had, which is kind of a professionalization of this. And then creating artist network opportunities, so artists can come in from Montana, Utah, California, and then we can send artists from here into those spaces. And so it's really kind of a professionalization and of the DJ electronic music artist, I think, is what's happening.
And you've worked to create one component of that, a Winter Electronic Music Festival in Boise. What inspired the idea for this festival that you've called Under the Freeze?
Yeah.
And how did the concept come together?
Absolutely. I'm really excited about Under the Freeze. When I told people about this, they thought I was a little crazy, which maybe I am a little bit, but that's what you have to be. So it's an outdoor electronic music show. It's in downtown Boise. Secret location that we send to everybody on our guest list. It'll be 5 to 10 p.m., January 25th. And we're going to bring a massive sound system. I mean, we've upgraded our sound system, huge lighting effects. There's a full bar. I'm excited about the hot toddies and Glühwein, which is a German mulled wine, and some other drinks. But yeah, people might wonder, why would you do a show in the coldest month? That seems absolutely crazy. But I think it's going to work. And the reason I think it's going to work is that it works in Montreal, which is significantly colder than Boise. And people loved it. I mean, so many people came out. And I think that in the darkest, coldest time, which is sort of the end of January, everybody wants to get out. And I think Boise is kind of an outdoors town. It's such a beautiful space that it would be nice to be outside and celebrating winter rather than sort of sheltering from it. And so when you're dancing and moving quickly and there's a kind of a festival atmosphere, it's extremely fun.
What kind of an experience are you hoping that attendees will take from this festival?
Well, everybody will have a different experience. Some people who are veterans of the scene will get to hear new music played by 5 different DJs. So they each have their own styles. And so they'll be able to deep dive into that. For a person who's never been to something like this, I think that they will discover a whole new kind of music. And it's funny because sometimes people say, I dance so much. And I said, yeah, it's in the name, right? Electronic dance music. It's made for dancing. That is the purpose of this music. It's very euphoric. And when you have a lot of people around you dancing and moving, it creates a connection. So we've had a lot of people that have made real connections and friends and have met partners, and it really builds community. So that's one of the pillars actually of Under the Trees. The number one thing we want to do is build community around electronic dance music. And Space Banana will also be running a show nearby, so people can go indoors and outdoors. And so it's just going to be really a nice festival atmosphere. So I'm sort of imagining like a Christmas market combined with an electronic festival in the winter.
Kind of a mismatch of maybe the cozy and the fun and exciting, and maybe reclaiming some of those holiday vibes.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I think that's it. And there will be a ton of lights. So, it gets dark, but we're going to brighten up the sky and it'll be just vibrant. And when you brighten up with super lights and this festival atmosphere, you can sort of reclaim winter. Like you said, I think that's a good way to put it.
Do you plan your vacations based on whether you can speak the local language? With Babbel, language no longer has to be the barrier. I'm David Plotz, the CEO of CityCast, and I went to Mexico City a couple of years ago with my girlfriend, who's a native Spanish speaker. So I just let her do all the talking, like all of it. I adored the city, and now I'm going to go back in a couple of months, but with my college roommates, who are a bunch of middle-aged men, none of us Spanish speakers. When I was younger, I might not have been bold enough to do that, but now I'm not anxious because Babbel has me covered. Thanks to Babbel, I know how to order a taxi, how to give directions, how to order in a restaurant, all the small and useful bits of language that make international travel easier. Babbel's quick 10-minute lessons, handcrafted by over 200 language experts, get you to begin speaking your new language in 3 weeks or whatever pace you choose. And because conversing is the key to really understanding each other in a new language, Babbel is designed using practical, real-world conversations, especially the sort you need while traveling. Food, how to get places. Babbel's tips and tools are inspired by the real-life stuff you actually need when communicating. With a focus on conversation, you'll be ready to talk wherever you go. So I hope I'll see you in Mexico in a couple of months. Or, as we say, espero verte en Mexico en un par de meses. So let's get more of you talking in a new language. Babbel is gifting CityCast listeners 60% off subscriptions at babbel.com/CityCast. Get up to 60% off at babbel.com/CityCast. Spelled BABBEL.com/CityCast. Babbel.com/CityCast. Rules and restrictions may apply.
The Apple Watch Series 10 is here. It has the biggest display ever. It's also the thinnest Apple Watch ever, making it even more comfortable on your wrist, whether you're running, swimming, or sleeping. And it's the fastest charging Apple Watch, getting you 8 hours of charge in just 15 minutes. The Apple Watch Series 10, available for the first time in glossy jet black aluminum. Compared to previous generations, iPhone XS or later required. Charge time and actual results will vary.
I'm really curious to get your opinion. How do you see the growth of this music culture benefiting Boise, maybe culturally or socially or even economically?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of potential. You know, Treefort had a really successful rise and is a big economic boost for Boise when it happens. And Treefort led to, you know, the organizers of Treefort Duck Club now run several venues and bring in music acts much more consistently. So that's created opportunities for people to go to all kinds of shows. And Treefort this year booked Sophie Tucker, which is an electronic music act. And so I started Under the Trees, and within 8 months, the scene has grown dramatically, actually. Now we have, you know, these massive shows with after parties that are going till 4 a.m. I don't think that was happening 10 years ago in Boise. In terms of Under the Trees, I would like to grow into the size of Treefort. So a massive scale festival in the park that will bring in business, it'll bring in tourism. And I mean, we're already getting that. Actually, I get messages from people in Utah and LA, and it's like, what's happening in Boise right now? Like, this is crazy.
Yeah, I know people from Utah who have come up to see electronic shows in Boise, which I think is so wild and definitely wasn't happening a decade ago.
Yeah, and I think that there's really big potential, but part of it is about reframing what this music is. And I've talked to people and I said, you know, we're going to do this event. You're going to do what? Like, isn't that music loud and obnoxious? And it's like, no. Well, give me a second here. And I think being a professor of music has helped me kind of navigate and discuss some of these things with people who are not privy to this culture and kind of the scene. But it's the future, honestly, because it used to be that if you wanted to be a musician, you needed a very expensive music studio and you had to record your album and so forth. But now you just need a laptop and you can make music.
So it sounds like maybe you've encountered some misconceptions people have about electronic music. Have you also encountered any resistance or unexpected roadblocks while trying to build up the local electronic music scene?
Yes. So I think that there's an association of electronic dance music with, well, maybe it's the association of a rave. Like what makes a rave a rave? And I think there's a misconception that a rave is like a place where there's rampant drug use and kind of just wildness. And that's something I want to address, because I think the music itself is enveloping, and there's people who do drugs at all kinds of concerts, whether it be a country concert or rock concert or metal concert or whatever, and so that's something that happens everywhere. So it's not exclusive to electronic dance music, and I think that actually when you're in the electronic dance music world, you realize that perception is very antiquated. Actually, it's not a drug-laden place. Like it's at our events in particular, I've cultivated a kind of an atmosphere where people can bring their kids to the parks and they feel safe with their kids being there, and everybody else feels safe, and that's very important for a community to feel safe. So it's not a drug-laden place. It's not a place. It brings every different type of person. We had babies bopping and people into their 60s and 70s that were just grooving. And it's really an outgrowth of the disco era, and to some extent, but it's matured so that you have so many different styles that I think everybody will find something that they find interesting in it, and will have their misconceptions change very quickly after they go to a show.
So what would you say to someone who is new to electronic music or curious about the festival Under the Freeze? What would you say to encourage them to check it out or give it a chance or try it?
Yeah, I think the barrier to entry is really low. I think our tickets are somewhere around $20. And the cool thing is that all of that money goes into Under the Trees, which is a nonprofit. And so the purpose of the nonprofit is threefold. Number one, to create community, as I mentioned earlier. Number two is land stewardship, which is, as I see it, a kind of protection and advancement of Boise's natural beauty. So really taking care of the spaces that we do our events in. We'll pop up in the park. We want the park to be sustainable. We want the park to stay beautiful. When we do it in historic places like the Idaho Penitentiary, for example, we want that space to be as pristine as it was when we entered, so to remain its historic kind of grandeur. And then the final component is to be welcoming to everybody, so to unite people who may not actually have a chance to meet. Under the Trees brings people together from a variety of demographics, ages, and so forth. And I think that's what we need in this digital world.
Well, Dr. Tom, thank you so much. This was so exciting to find out more about Under the Freeze and about what electronic music means to you and your work in it and how it kind of coincides with classical music, which I never thought it did until I talked with you. So thank you so much.
You bet. Have a good one.
That's all for today here on CityCast Boise. If you enjoyed the show, don't forget to subscribe to our Hey Boise newsletter to keep up on all the events happening around the city. We'll be back tomorrow morning with our Friday News Roundup. See you then.